Welcome back to another episode of Turn One Podcast. We're your hosts, Jeremiah
and Thomas.
And today, we are talking about the dumpster fire that is Alpine F1. So, where do we start with this?
I mean, I think we have to start with the most current news, which is as of today, this morning, right? This is Monday the 3rd, 2nd, whatever it is, 3rd. Alpine F1 and Esteban Ocon released statements saying that Esteban Ocon would finish his current contract with Alpine through the 2024 F1 season, at which point him and the team would, I think, mutually part ways is what they said, which basically means Esteban was fired. Or at least not renewed on his contract.
Was Ocon at Renault before it became Alpine?
That's a good question. I want to say yes, right?
While you're looking that up, we're talking about a team. First of all, Esteban Ocon, Fernando Alonso. That was Alpine for the longest time, actually. So you have to understand that he was racing against one of the best drivers in Formula One. So respectfully so, he has a good resume built around him. But the thing is that it comes to a point to where it's like, okay, but you're not advancing. And now we see him up against Pierre Gasly, and Pierre Gasly's putting up a fight. Pierre Gasly's not a two-time Formula One world champion. He's a good driver. He's a race winner. But
won in an AlphaTauri.
And
had like 13 overtakes 1 year in Monaco somehow.
Yeah,
in an AlphaTauri.
Yeah, ridiculous. So he's a good driver. By no means this isn't a video shaming Pierre Gasly. But what this video is concerning is Esteban Ocon is not improving past. It's almost like he's hit a wall. He reached a point where he's still really good, but he reached a point to where he's no longer improving. And who knows, maybe it is he needs a change of scenery. He needs a new teammate, which I mean, I guess he has in Pierre Gasly, but more specifically a new car, new strategist, new race engineer in his ear talking to him. I mean, maybe he just needs a new scene, but what we're seeing from him is like he's hit a wall. He's stalled out and he's not improving anymore.
Esteban, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Esteban did race for Renault back in their last year, which was 2020.
Okay.
And he raced with Danny Rick that year. That was the year that they dropped Nico, and Nico went on his hiatus from F1 was in 2019. So 2020, they roll in with the Danny Rick and Esteban Ocon combo, and then going into 2021 is where they pivot to the Alpine F1 team, which is Renault, the works team, essentially, as their brand. Fun fact, if y'all didn't know this, Alpine is a car manufacturer brand in France. We didn't really know that, I feel like, because we did a short video a while back that was like, name the F1 teams that are also car makers, and we left off Alpine.
Are they?
Yeah,
I understand that we got that comment, but are they?
Yeah, they make very specialty cars in France, but it's like a legit, like that's what they do is they make cars.
Okay.
So the deal with Alpine, just doing a little bit of backstory, is they are Renault. So Renault is a French car manufacturer. They've been around in F1 for years and years and years. I couldn't even tell you how long. What, maybe 80s, 70s? They go back to 77 in Formula One. So they've been around for a while. They interchanged some. What were some of their other names that they rolled out? Do you know? It was Renault. Were they were Lotus?
Yeah,
for a while.
So they were Renault, and then they were Renault Lotus or Lotus Renault, one or the other, and then they went back to Renault, and now they're Alpine.
Yeah, but they've been an engine supplier for forever. Coming into 2021, though, and we're going to specifically look at Alpine, and maybe later on, I mean, comment if you want a Renault deep dive. I'm sure they're deserving of one because they've had a history on par with some of the other top constructors. But looking just at Alpine as they enter the sport in 2021, they are the perennial midfield team, right? They're 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Or at least they were.
And as they come into the 2023 season and 2024 season, they were dubbed the all-French team because they were rolling with the Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly lineup, which are two Frenchman drivers,
right?
Plus the French combination of Alpine and Renault as your car manufacturer. Everything about them was French except for their initial team principal, which was Otmar. Otmar left Aston Martin, maybe mutually, maybe not so mutually, with Lawrence Stroll coming in and taking over. He gets hired on at Alpine, and they were a little bit disappointed with his results, right? So Otmar got let go middle of last season, I believe, 2023, because they were like middle to lower middle pack. They were 5 and 6. They weren't fighting for 3 like they wanted to be. So they replaced him with Bruce Fannin.
Is it Bruce?
Fannin?
Bruce or Bruno?
Bruno Fannin.
Yeah.
Replace him with him, and he comes in, and it has not been.
Yeah. Hey, we don't like what you're doing over here, Almar. We're going to get rid of you, and then we're going to be at the very back of the grid for the entirety of the next season.
It has been,
because that's a better move.
It's been a rough go for him overall. I was trying to see where their actual finishes were. So they go 5th, 4th, 6th last year, and right now they're on track to be tied for last.
Jeez.
I think they're 9th, and the only team behind them is Kick, right?
Just scroll back over to the right. So Pierre Gasly was good. He had a 3rd place finish. Esteban Ocon had a 3rd place finish last year. I mean, it looked like they were really competing for it. They finished in 6th. That's kind of surprising. But I guess with the resurgence of Aston Martin, that kind of kicked them out of that 5th spot.
Last year, you had Aston Martin obviously starting the year off hot. And then remember, you had McLaren the back half of the year catch up.
Yeah.
If Aston wasn't hot like they were and McLaren didn't catch up, then there was a good chance Alpine could have been 4th.
Yeah, and then unfortunately with this season, the way that it started out, they just got the formula wrong. I mean, when you're looking at, like, if you've been looking at the first couple races, when they talk about speeds that the teams have been, like, you know how they'll do the comparison, how much faster is a team this year on this track than they were last year? Alpine was like the only team on the grid that actually had a positive number, meaning they're slower on this track this year than they were the year before. And granted, here's where it gets weird, because Almar did get released last year, so it's tough for me to say on whether or not Bruno is working with Otmar's car, or if because Otmar was replaced about midway of the season, if this is Bruno's design.
Is this the year that, like, Bruno's still getting his pieces in place? Like, he's dealing with half of Otmar stuff and half of his stuff, and they're not meshing?
It's definitely not.
And it's just leading to 2 points finishes so far?
It's unfortunate, too, because we talked about Esteban Ocon, how he went against Daniel Ricciardo when Daniel was in the Renault. Daniel in the Renault, by the way, was fresh off of the Red Bull scene, and the Renault car was very identical in how it handled to the Red Bull car, which is why when Daniel went to Renault, he was still getting good results when he could finish a race. Now, that Renault engine, we know, wasn't really holding out, so there was a lot of DNFs here and there with the engine exploding and all, but Esteban Ocon was going against Daniel Ricciardo. Then the very next year, he goes against Fernando Alonso for 2 years. And then after that, he's matched up with Pierre Gasly, and we talked about all Pierre Gasly's credentials. So it's not like Esteban Ocon is going against your local Nikita Mazepin. He has good competition. And my problem with that is, like we talked about, he's hit a wall. And Pierre Gasly, for as good as he is, he can only do as much as the car can do. Same with Esteban Ocon. So you have these two drivers, which I would consider mid-tier, probably with the capabilities of breaking into the top tier of drivers, with a car that is massively, massively underperforming, and it's hindering their results, making them look bad.
Prior to this year, the way that we viewed Alpine was always that they were just the midfield team. Everything about them was midfield. Their drivers were midfield. Their car was midfield. Like, everything about them. This year, the only difference is their car is garbage.
Right.
The drivers, we think, if you put them in any other car, would still have midfield results, right?
And, if you were to put Pierre Gasly, in my opinion, or Esteban Ocon in that Mercedes, I would say that they'd probably get the same results as, like, George Russell. I don't really think that they're that far off of a George Russell.
No.
Right, exactly.
Maybe, maybe a little more aggressive, but not last year, because last year George Russell was super aggressive.
And the only reason that they have to be more aggressive is because they're in a car that can't compete regularly, so they can't be as conservative whenever they have opportunities presented to them. Hence what we got in Monaco, where Esteban Ocon tried to go up the inside of Pierre Gasly. You have to take advantage of opportunities like that when your car cannot compete at the same level as these other cars on the grid. So, and another thing, we have the rivalry of Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, how they grew up together. They karted against each other. They were best friends in the karting scene, and then things switched, rivalries broke out, and all of a sudden you have these two guys going on their own paths, but ultimately ending up in the sport of Formula One, and now on the exact same team in the same machinery, which is wild.
Because you start in karting, and again, you're right. There's kind of friendships, there's bonds, whatever. But then when suddenly you're competing for one of 20 spots in the world, it gets a little more heated.
Exactly. So you have these two guys who, there's a rivalry between them. They grew up, they separated as friends. They're no longer friends back in the junior series. And now they're both in the Formula One scene. They're on the same team, and they're fighting for the limelight. They're fighting for that number one spot. So you get these great battles between them, but ultimately you also get these horrible travesties between them, where you have both cars DNFing, or Esteban Ocon sending it up the inside, ramping up Pierre Gasly, and such as we saw in Monaco. And you'll have this to continue realistically, probably as long as they're on a team, just because neither one of them wants to give way to that first spot. So in my opinion, you have these two drivers that are highly competitive. All you really need to do is put them in a good car. If Alpine can just figure out the car situation, get them in a good car, you have a team that's instantly competing at the top. I mean, they have the drivers with the capabilities to be up there. They just don't have a car that can do anything for them.
Let's move away from Alpine, the constructor, for a minute, and we can go back to them. But I want to look at what broke kind of the, camel's back or whatever with Esteban Ocon. So obviously they've never had like stellar results, because again, the way that we looked at Alpine was midfield, and like if you got midfield results, that's good. We never expected you to get a race win really with them, although Esteban Ocon did back in 2021. He won a race, which was Hungary. So 2022 you have midfield results, fine. 2023 I think was a kicker for a couple of reasons. One, Otmar brought in the Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon combo. Now, he didn't bring in Esteban Ocon, but he combined the two French drivers. And everybody at the time thought that that was a very bold decision because, like you said, they have a very tense past.
Sure.
Trying to combine those. And also, it's not like you were bringing in a star driver in Pierre Gasly, like to really ramp things up. You were bringing on pretty much the same level of driver, so it's not like a groundbreaking move. Number two, Esteban Ocon retires last year 6 times. Now, some of those are cars, because Renault is not known for making reliable vehicles.
Jeez.
But also, there's something to be said about the driver performance when you're retiring that many times, and also pretty regularly finishing out of the top 10 or behind your teammate, even though last year they were on kind of even footings. Here's the other thing. With Bruno now taking over, I think he sees Esteban as easy pickings. You look at last year's results, plus you look at this year's results, combined with him almost taking out his teammate in Monaco. I think it all adds up to Esteban being out. And if you missed it, so 2 weeks ago in Monaco, they're going around the turn right before you enter the tunnel, which is not an area to pass because that is an area prone to driver sliding, even when the track is dry. Pierre's on the outside line, the regular racing line. Esteban Ocon dives down the middle, can't brake in time, ramps himself off of the right side of Pierre Gasly, and could have ruined both of their races right there on a track that you shouldn't be trying to ruin yours, let alone your teammate's race. I think all that adds up to Bruno looking at this going, we got to mix stuff up. This is not the driver pairing to get us back to the midfield. I don't want these two guys being my drivers together when I have a car that I like. It's time to make changes.
So you make the change. You decide, I'm going to keep Pierre Gasly. Now, this is where it gets weird because Esteban Ocon has been the staple of Alpine since its inception back in 21. That have never changed. They've changed out Fernando Alonso. They had him 2 years.
Alonso dipped for greener grass.
Sure. Yeah, right.
Way greener grass in hindsight.
They kept Esteban Ocon, paired him up with Pierre Gasly. So Esteban's been there for 4 years, and now they're saying goodbye to Ocon and sticking with Pierre Gasly.
I think that's the right move.
Remains to be seen. I guess we'll find out.
I mean, would you have kept Pierre?
Personally, yeah, just for a mix-up of things. You got to remember both of them right now are sitting at 1 retirement each and 1 point each.
Yeah.
So it's pretty even as far as the breakdown
bad.
of them. It's just not looking good whatsoever over there.
I think that they were going to keep one driver and remove the other, and I think Monaco's what pulled the trigger on that.
Okay. I have 2 topics I do want to touch on. One, where does Esteban Ocon go?
I'm going to be real honest. I don't think he goes anywhere.
Really?
I think he's out. Not to say he doesn't pull a Hulkenberg and come back in a little bit. There's not enough seats for him right now.
What are the seats?
We're debating where Carlos Sainz goes.
That's a good point.
Carlos Sainz is on the hook right now to go to Williams, possibly.
That's a good point. And if you're looking at the Red Bull B team, and if you were to look at Yuki Tsunoda, if he was to leave Red Bull B team, Red Bull isn't going to go for a driver that already exists, even though they did that with Daniel Ricciardo.
There's
they're
no
going
way
to go
Ocon.
They're going to go with somebody in the Red Bull development program.
There's no way Ocon moves up from this.
No, he's not going to go to like Mercedes. He's not going to take the second Red Bull spot. He's definitely not going to go to McLaren because that duo was locked down.
If I'm Stake, I'm not changing out either of my drivers.
Only thing that I could see as far as steps up go, well, first of all, every step is a step up from Alpine right now. But if you take that out, the only thing that I could see as a possibility is if Lance Stroll was out and they put Esteban Ocon in there with Fernando, and that's just not going to happen.
Because Lawrence.
Exactly. So I could definitely see your point. Maybe Esteban Ocon's out of Formula One. Maybe now, maybe for a year, maybe permanently. That would stink, of course. But
would it?
Like I said, he's not, like, you're gonna keep giving him all this flack. I'm telling you, he is a good driver.
He's a good driver.
He's a race winner.
But I'm saying there are 20 plus other drivers I would take over him. If nothing else, for excitement.
20 plus over drivers.
For excitement, for youth. If I'm, like I said, the only team that maybe would replace a driver I think would be Kick, Sauber, whatever they're going by. I don't think you change out Bottas for Esteban Ocon. So the only one on the hook is Zhou. I'd rather have the youth of Zhou than Esteban Ocon.
I would differ on that.
And I think Zhou brings in a bigger following to Stake than Esteban Ocon would.
I agree with the following as far as Zhou goes, but as far as driver performance, I'm taking Bottas and Ocon for sure.
Maybe.
He's F1 potential. There's no reason why he shouldn't have a seat, except for that there aren't any seats.
That's how a lot of driver careers end, though.
Sure.
I mean, that's how Hülkenberg's career ended the first time. They ran out of seats. There were too many up, because remember when Hulk left in 2019, that's when you have Verstappen starting to cook. That's when you have Lando entering the sports. That's when you have Charles entering Ferrari. Charles moved to Ferrari in 2019, I think, right? Because he was at Sauber in 2018. That's when you have all of these young guns coming up and taking the seats. That's the same situation we live in now. We need seats for Carlos. We need seats for potentially Checo. We need seats for Ollie Behrman and Liam Lawson and Drugovich and Pourchaire. Like, we need seats for all those guys. Esteban Ocon shouldn't be in the mix anymore.
That's tough to say. I don't know if I would take it that far, but I can definitely see that as an option.
Would Haas take him on?
I mean, realistically, maybe, yeah. Partner him up with Ollie Behrman.
Oh, you're kicking them both out. Okay, I was going to say, like, replace Magnussen for Ocon. I would do that.
That's what I'm saying. Kick Magnussen out for Ocon, then you have Ollie Behrman.
Oh, because Hulk's already leaving.
Hulk's gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Man. Okay.
Okay, so then the only option that I would see then is the Haas move. That's what we're left with in the conversation of.
I mean, Haas are Stakes still, but I don't know what Stakes contract details are right now.
That's wild. That's wild to think about. Okay, where I want to transition this to, and an even bigger question: who fills the spot?
So here's the weird thing about Alpine, and this is why we kind of started this episode. Historically, Renault's good. You know, Renault's not a bottom feeder. They're not a Haas. They're not a Williams of today. Now, of course, Williams back in the day was a champion. But Renault has always been midfield, and then every couple of years they would fight for third, right? They would get, like, back when Danny Rick made the switch from Red Bull to Renault was in their era when they really thought they could get a top 3 finish.
Yeah.
And they could have if they kept their car on the track, if their car didn't explode every other week.
Right.
They had engine issues. But they've lost that a little bit. They moved down to competing for 4, 5, and 6 every year. And now, of course, they're in the 9th to 10th range. They're ahead of Stake just because they have 2 points. But we're almost halfway through the season at this point, so it's not looking great for them, and I don't see them really turning it around that much. Who replaces him? I think you go get I'm sure they have an academy guy, you know, or an F2.
Someone in the F1 academy.
Someone in their drive. Because remember, they had... Alpine blew it because they had Oscar Piastri in their academy.
Yeah.
And they lost him straight up to McLaren and Zach Brown.
They just didn't open a seat for him.
They didn't open a seat for him. There's probably financial ramifications for that. I mean, we remember the whole lawsuit thing, which eventually got dropped. But they blew that chance. So who's their Oscar Piastri in their system is probably the answer I would go for.
I'm bringing back Mick Schumacher.
Although... I'll let you get to that 1 second. Carlos.
At the Alpine?
Okay, take
I
this
don't
year.
want to see it.
Take this year out. Alpine is not going to forever be a bottom feeder. They have the money and the resources to be a midfield team consistently. This year is an anomaly. Whether it be the drivers or the car performance, it's definitely the car performance.
Yeah.
Like, the drivers aren't great, but it's definitely the car performance pushing them to the bottom. If they fix that with the money and resources they have, they're back to the midfield. That's not a bad landing spot for Carlos, given that his other option is Haas or Williams.
I see what you're saying.
Because he's not going to Mercedes.
It's not falling all the way from grace, but it's still falling from grace. And then you have a matchup of Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly, and that doesn't excite me.
But Carlos would smoke Pierre Gasly.
That's a good question.
What if he doesn't?
That's a good question, would he?
I think he would.
Okay, say Carlos Sainz does make the move to Alpine, Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly. What if Carlos Sainz ends up being just another Esteban Ocon and we figure out, oh, Esteban Ocon is actually really good. We just never saw him in a different car but that Renault Alpine.
I mean, we saw Esteban in a Force India and he wasn't that hot.
I thought he was good. That's when he was teammates with Sergio Perez, right?
Yeah, and they were... Because that's when Sergio won a race and we were like mind blown.
Gosh. If that's the case, Yuki Tsunoda is absolutely terrible because Pierre Gasly won a race in the AlphaTauri. Why couldn't Yuki?
It's a little bit different.
The same car, same concept. We're talking about a team that shouldn't win a race that won a race.
Pierre won that AlphaTauri when like the top 5 were all taken out. I mean, you remember like Max was out, Charles was out, Lewis was out.
Well, what happened in this Hungary race? Because we saw Fernando Alonso get 4th in 2021 also.
That's back when they were competing for like a 3rd place finish. They ended up getting 4th that
You're telling
year.
me Esteban Ocon won that race off merit with
5th?
no problems in front of him?
A 4th and 5th place team can win a race. Right now, just this year, we have Red Bull winning races, Ferrari winning races, McLaren winning races. It's definitely possible.
I don't believe it.
I don't know what you're trying to get here.
I want to know how this race finished. Esteban Ocon in 1st, Lewis Hamilton in 2nd, Carlos Sainz in 3rd.
Look at how many people retired. Lando,
My point exactly.
Valtteri, Sergio, Charles.
My point exactly. These are guys that don't want to race unless craziness unfolds. Because that car can't win a race. Not because they're incapable. It's because their car can't. Now, they're guys that they're good enough that when opportunity strikes, they take full advantage of it. So, okay, so this.
His race win and Pierre's are almost identical.
Okay. What about that Sergio Perez race win?
The Force India, yeah, that was wild.
Exactly. Probably the same situation. I don't remember that race.
But I think most people credit his driving ability on that one.
Sergio's?
Yeah.
Okay.
To win that race.
Okay. Because I'm saying if Sergio's win at Force India is equivalent to Esteban's win at Alpine and Pierre's win at AlphaTauri, then that would mean if you put Esteban Ocon in that Red Bull, he then wins as many races as Perez did last year, if not more.
I think there's a chance of that.
I wouldn't disagree with that, which is, here again, why I say Esteban Ocon is not a bad driver.
He's not, but Formula One okay.
We're moving on to that from that.
No, hang on real quick. Formula One isn't all about driving, as crazy as that sounds. There is brand and likability in marketing, and no one likes Esteban Ocon.
Yikes. I wanted to move back.
People
move
want
on from
Checo.
that. We got sucked back into that conversation. Who ends up in that Alpine seat?
I think Carlos has a really good shot now. I really do. His eyes just got super
Here's my
wide.
problem.
Because remember, Mercedes closed the door on him. We're pretty sure Red Bull has closed the door on him. We're not 100% sure, but we're pretty sure. Dude, his options were Haas or Williams, and now he gets the chance to sign at Alpine?
Here's my problem with that. You said Formula One is also about marketability. I think Alpine is boring.
Yeah, they are.
And I would much rather see him at Williams for the excitement value.
But Williams can't pay him what Alpine can pay him.
I know, but Alpine's so boring.
And he could get... If Alpine turns their car around, which they will, I'm not doubting at all that Alpine will turn their car around. They'll be back to finishing 5th or 6th or whatever. He would rather race in that car because he has a chance of winning a race in an Alpine. He does not have a chance in a Williams or a Haas. Maybe in a Haas.
It's ugly.
A Haas on their best day, he's got a chance. Outside of Carlos, it's got to be an F2 driver. It has to. There's no one else.
Mick Schumacher. Bring back Mick Schumacher.
Because Ollie's going to Ferrari or Haas, right?
Right.
That's the theory because we've seen him in Haas gear.
Right.
Mick
is a reserve driver at Mercedes, and they're already...
I know, they've already eyed Mick.
They didn't eye Mick at Mercedes.
No. Alpine has
Alpine,
eyed.
yeah. But Mercedes, that seat's not going to Mick Schumacher, even though he's a reserve driver. They have a guy in mind that's currently racing in F2, and Kimi Antonelli. And
It's
whether or not
definitely
that'll
Kimi
play out, we'll
Antonelli.
find out. But I think that it would be super cool to see Mick Schumacher back on the grid. I think the fans would like to see it. And if he was at Alpine, we would finally see him in a car that wasn't that terrible excuse for a car that Haas rolled out in his rookie year, and then in that awful but not as terrible but still horrible car that they rolled out with Kevin Magnussen.
I'm trying to think if there's any other options other than Mick.
I want
or
to see Mick
Carlos.
in a Formula One car that's not trash.
I don't think it'd make a difference, man.
Jeez. I think
He
you're wrong.
crashed. He just crashed so many times.
The car was terrible.
You running the car? The crash was on the car?
If the car loses grip randomly, or the downforce, or the tire degradation was so bad that it becomes a slip and slide out there for him, yeah, I can see all the crashes making sense. You got to remember, he was on a team where that Haas car had to pit after like 7 laps because their tires were shot. Meanwhile, everybody else is extending their pit out into like lap 18, lap 20, and here goes Haas in lap 7 pitting because those tires are shot.
If you're Bruno at Alpine, do
Okay.
you want your first big hire to be Mick Schumacher or Carlos Sainz?
Mick Schumacher.
You're lying through your teeth right now, and you know it. There's no way.
The smarter move would obviously be Carlos Sainz, but in the event that
100%.
Carlos Sainz doesn't unfold and he goes somewhere else, I say bring out Schumacher.
I agree. If Carlos is unavailable for whatever reason, okay,
Oh, here we go.
you're taking Mick over Lawson?
Lawson's spoken for.
By who?
Red Bull.
Not if the check gets written.
He's going to go to the Red Bull B team.
Not if a check gets written.
No chance.
Just like Oscar jumped
You're
ship from
telling me
Alpine.
you would sacrifice the chance at driving the Red Bull A team car to end up at Alpine where there is no higher team that is the A team? That's your ceiling.
If I have the chance to make $2 million versus making $100,000,
Not a chance. Versus a future where you could possibly make 35 million, 50 million.
you could always work your way up from there, though. Do 2 years at Alpine, whereas you'd
Was
still be the
Esteban
Red
able
Bull.
to?
Well, Esteban is trash. I don't know. What do you want from me?
Nobody at Renault/Alpine advances from there. That's its
Oh, boy,
peak.
they really don't, do they?
No.
Because you had Danny Rick.
Who went to McLaren,
Fall
which is
off.
nice, but that's because he already had the name that he made at Red Bull.
Yeah, so you had him fall off.
Fernando Alonso got to escape because he was
Escape.
2-time world champion.
And took a risk
Fernando
escaping.
Alonso.
He wasn't going for a for sure deal.
Exactly.
Hulk career ended at Alpine until he came
Esteban
back.
Ocon probably career ended. Pierre Gasly, this is probably going to be his peak. No top team is going to take him. This is Pierre Gasly's peak. And I don't want that for Liam Lawson. If I'm Liam, I'm staying in the Red Bull system because there's a chance if you do good at Toro, what is it now? RB. Visa Cash
Toro
App.
Rosso, man. You're going back generations.
Jeez. If you take the chance and stay with the Red Bull system, you go to RB, and then you're looked at by not just Red Bull. You're looked at by Mercedes. You're looked at by Ferrari. You're looked at by McLaren. McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari, and Red Bull, they're not looking at Alpine to see where their next big hire is going to come from.
It's kind of where people go to end their career.
Point made.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess, is that all we want to cover with Esteban and Alpine?
I'm happy.
Do you feel like Alpine can recover? Because I really do. I feel like they can.
As far as building a car,
Midfield team.
they're going to go back to midfield.
Yeah.
They're not going to be a top contender.
No.
No.
Well,
No.
we won't get into this, but dude, they've got the Reynolds train coming in.
The Ryan Reynolds.
The dude built,
Aren't they also
the
invested
dude
in
built
by
Wrexham
aren't
to a
they
powerhouse.
also aren't they also being invested in by a group that contains Travis Kelce and
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes?
Something like that.
Okay. It's still not exciting. Like, I don't know why they can have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Ryan Reynolds all investing in this one F1 team, and I'm still not excited about it.
Because we haven't seen that investment pay off yet.
And probably won't.
And who's to say when that money hits? Who's to say what that money's for?
For all you know, it could have already hit, and they've just
blown it.
They're terrible.
Or is it to go sign Carlos for $10 million a year?
Having a better driver is not going to fix your poor excuse for a mechanical failure.
No, but it'd be fun, man. If I'm Ryan Reynolds, I'm saying, here's $100 million. Go get me the best driver you can possibly get me, not Mick Schumacher.
Not Mick Schumacher.
Right? Because, again...
Yeah, because Ryan Reynolds said that.
Ryan Reynolds is 100% going to make that into his own TV show.
I don't believe that.
100%. And you would rather follow Carlos and Pierre than Pierre and Mick Schumacher.
I would rather follow Carlos and Williams than Carlos and Alpine.
Well, that's not... No. Don't send Carlos to Williams.
It's more exciting because think about it. He'd be partnered up with Albon.
This isn't the F1 video game where we try to rebuild Williams from the ashes.
Jeez.
We're taking them back to their 1980s glory, folks.
And I have.
He joins Williams and just immediately busts out championships. Putting all his money into powertrain, nothing on durability.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, let us know in the comments. I guess I have two questions, Ilo. You might want to ask one of these. Where does Esteban Ocon fall, if anywhere, and who fills his seat?
Guys, if you think Mick to Alpine causes Alpine to go to the second best constructor on the grid, I don't think I agree with you, but man, I would like to.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye, guys.